Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today we will explore how to photograph the Milky Way. If you explore my Instagram or my website, even my Facebook, you know that I really like to photograph the Milky Way, and I'm gonna show you how I do it and which gear I use, and also I will explain how you can do it yourself. So let's start the video. So this is my personal technique that I'm gonna show you how I photograph the Milky Way. So as long you have a manual camera control, smartphone, DSLR, mirrorless, whatever, as long you have a manual control, you can photograph the Milky Way. Just to prove my point, here it is on the info card or in the description, a video that I photographed the Milky Way with a smartphone. The most important thing that you need: a camera, a lens of course, and a tripod. This is really important. You really need to have a tripod. Of course, if you use you can DIY anything, but as long the camera doesn't move, that's really great. Also, a bonus is to have a shutter release controller. If you don't have that, it's not a big problem. You can put a delay on your camera of 2 seconds or 5 seconds, or even most of the modern cameras you can shutter release through the app via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. That option is also really great. Photography for me, photography is divided in 3 parts. The first part is your homework, and in that homework you have to prepare everything. The second part, it's taking the picture itself, and the third part is editing that photo. Okay, let's start with the homework, the first part. To start, we need to find a place to photograph the Milky Way, and of course that means that we have to find somewhere where the light pollution isn't that harsh. So I use a really cool website, the link is on the description. And this website actually shows the light pollution areas, okay? As you can see, I am in Atlas 2015 on the top corner there, but I'm gonna go to the latest one, 18. So let's zoom in. Where I will make my photo is around between Grenoble and Geneva, exactly over here. So as you can see, it's not really the most perfect area to photograph the Milky Way, especially there is a lot of light pollution around it, but I think I can manage that, especially on color correction. Maybe I can overcome the light pollution. So try to avoid at max the red, yellowish, greenish areas, because those areas are really dense light pollution, okay? Because the light pollution of the city will reflect on the atmosphere, and the brightness will overcome the brightness of the stars, and that's really bad, okay? That doesn't mean that you can do it. I'm gonna show you this picture. As you can see, there is a bit of flare and it's not a perfect photo, but that photo was taken over here. Let me show you. So it was in the NC Lake, on this small village over here next to the lake. And as you can see, actually, I managed to photograph the Milky Way, although there is a lot of light pollution over there, but sometimes it's possible. Take in account that you have to avoid that light posts make a huge flare on your lens, but yeah, that's really cool. You can try to overcome those problems. But of course, if you go somewhere like I did last week, as you can see, it's a way better place to photograph the Milky Way because there is no light pollution around it. It's a really cool place to photograph the Milky Way. But it was 3 hours to get there, and yeah, but if you really want to get the best picture as you can of the Milky Way, try to avoid the max of light pollution as possible. That is my advice. Now that you know where to photograph the Milky Way, you need to know when, because that is important. So I usually advise to photograph the Milky Way during April to September, even October maybe, because the position of the Earth and relationship of the Sun and the center of the Milky Way will be visible during night. Okay, if it's during the winter, actually the Sun will be facing us with the galaxy, so the sky will be bluish, so you can't photograph the Milky Way. Also, another thing you need to check out is the moon and the position of the Milky Way and all of that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use an app to check all of that. I'm gonna use an app called Photopills. It's a paying app, but if you check out how to photograph the Milky Way with a smartphone, I leave the video on the description or info card. I show you there how you can do it for free. So let's do this. I'm gonna use Photopills for now. One thing you need to check out also is the moon. So I'm gonna use here the part of the moon here, and here on the corner, as you can see, there is two dots. Okay, those two dots is the moon, the blue dot, and the yellow dot, it's the sun. And you want to avoid a moon. Why? Because the moon will reflect light to the atmosphere, and again the atmosphere will become blue, so that is a problem. So here is a time lapse while I was photographing the Milky Way. The bright of the moon is still visible, and once it's gone we can see the Milky Way. The moon is setting and we can see the Milky Way. That's easy. So back to the app. As you can see, this horizontal line, it's the horizon, and you can see where the moon is coming up and where the moon is going down, as well as the sun. Now you are imagining, wow, the most perfect night to photograph the Milky Way is the new moon. And you are right, because if I choose here, let's go to July 2018, it was the time that I was doing this video. As you can see here at the 30th July, and I click here, you can see actually that the moon rises at the same time as the sun and goes down almost at the same time as the sun. So that means that during the night you have all the night to photograph the Milky Way. But sometimes we can't do that. So for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna go back to the calendar. I will try to photograph the Milky Way at the 22 July, just for the challenge. So 22 July, here we go. And as you can see, it isn't perfect, but around here, 2 o'clock in the morning, the moon goes down and I can start to photograph the Milky Way. This app really have another cool feature. I'm gonna show you here. I'm gonna go to the planner. I'm gonna admit that this app has a lot of features. I won't make a tutorial about Photopills, because on their own YouTube channel they have a lot of things explaining everything. I'm gonna just show you what you need to know to photograph the Milky Way. So let's go to the date. Again, let's go to the date that I want to photograph the Milky Way. It is the 22 July. Here we are. Okay, here we have our date. So I'm not this isn't the good place that I want to photograph the Milky Way. It is around, it is here. Okay, let's put the point over there, and as you can see now, the 22, the sun goes down, the moon is still up, and there is some light of the sun. So you need to pay attention to these numbers over here, because this is important too before watching the moon, because this is the sunset. The civil sunset, that's a bit strange to say, is when the sun goes behind, it's not visible for you. For example, if the sun is behind a mountain, that means that the civil sunset, it's already happened. Okay, the nautical, it's the most known one, it's the most talked one, is when the sun goes across the horizon. Okay, and astronomical sunset, it's one of the most important ones to photograph the Milky Way, is when no light of the sun is affecting the atmosphere. So that number is really important. So as you can see, it's the after 22 hours and 37 minutes. So you know that no light of the sun will interfere with your photo. That's good. But as you can see, we still at around that time it still have some light of the moon, so let's try to avoid that. So as you can see here, after 2 in the morning the moon goes down and the Milky Way will be visible for a few minutes. And this is our small window. It's really small window, but it's possible. So I'm gonna add some cool feature over here. I'm gonna activate the Milky Way and go back. And as you can see, we can see the position of the Milky Way moving like so. Also down there is the night AR, if you want to be really detailed how to photograph the Milky Way. And there we go. As you can see also, there is the how tall is the center of the Milky Way. This night isn't a perfect night, but I'm gonna do it anyway because it's a beautiful place. It's not far where I live, so there we go. Well then, it isn't a perfect place and it isn't a perfect timing, but I'm gonna do it anyway, just for the challenge of it, and also so you can see that you can challenge yourself. You just have to do your homework and try to photograph the Milky Way, okay? Well then, to finish your homework, please check if you have everything on your bag. Tripod, the battery are fully loaded. If you have your memory card on your camera, really important. If you have everything okay, and try everything before even leaving the house. Really important. If there is something missing, you won't be able to take a picture. Most of the times that I'm gonna photograph the Milky Way, we're gonna travel at least 2-3 hours. If the battery isn't loaded, if you are missing a memory card, you will lose 2 hours of driving for nothing. Just check before you leave that everything is okay, that everything is ready with your gear. Well then, the method that I'm gonna show you is one simple long exposure. The most simple one. It's not a stocking, it's not a panorama, it's not a star tracking thing. It's the most simple one, and it's the best one to start for now. It works. Let's do it. The settings of your camera. Let's start with the shutter speed. So the shutter speed time, it will be calculated by the focal length of your lens and the sensor size of your camera. The wider is your lens, or the field of view of your lens, the better, and the bigger is your sensor, the better also. And the combination of the focal length and your sensor size are called the 35mm equivalent. I'm gonna use that term a lot. The wider angle you have, the better, because that will give you more seconds of shutter speed. Why is that? Because science. That's a good answer, yes? Because Earth is rotating itself, the stars will move on the sky. So the wider your angle of view is, more time you will have to make your exposure without having star trails. Okay, star trails are beautiful photos, but this photo is the Milky Way, so we don't want to have star trails. So there is a really simple formula that you can find out how many seconds of shutter speed you can use. I call it the 500 rule. It's not really a rule, but let's call 500 rule. It's really simple. So it's 500 divided by the 35mm equivalent of your camera and lens. And the result of that formula will give you the number of seconds of your shutter speed. Really simple. I'm gonna give you the example of my camera. I have here a 14mm lens, and this camera actually is a full frame camera, a 35mm camera. So 500 divided by 14, we're gonna have 37 seconds. So like that, I know that I have 37 seconds to make my shutter speed and have a really good exposure without having any star trails. So most cameras are limited to 30 seconds of shutter speed, like this one, like my camera. the camera not in manual mode but in bulb mode, and I put 37 seconds on the shutter release, and will do the work for me. Well done! I imagine that many of you have an 18mm lens on the APS-C camera. That means that the camera will crop about 1.6. So the 18mm will be equivalent to 29mm focal length. That number is really important because we're gonna pick up 500 divided by 29 will be around 17 seconds. So you have 17 seconds of shutter speed without having start rails. So a friend of mine bought a really cool and reasonable cheap camera that uses a Micro Four Thirds sensor, and that sensor multiplies by 2. So she have a lens that have a focal length of 12mm, so the 35mm equivalent is 24. So 500 divided by 24, it's 21 seconds. So if you are using a 12mm on a Micro Four Thirds camera, you have 21 seconds of shutter speed for your exposure. Now then, let's handle the smartphones. So if you can avoid the smartphones, even better. But if you want to try this technique and you really want to use your smartphone, because they have a really small sensor, so the noise will be a really big problem on that kind of camera. But if you really want to use it and try to find out the 35mm focal length equivalent, it will be around 30-35mm. Okay, so that will give you around 15-16 seconds at most. So you can also add one stop of light by using a high quality lens like this one. This is the Pexel 16 4K. Not cheap camera, it's a very expensive lens. This lens doesn't lose a lot of light, and you can get one stop of light extra with this lens because you're gonna use 30 seconds. It's good to know. If you want to see the review, if you want to see the review of this lens, I have it also in the info card and on the description. Okay, now as you have your shutter speed calculated, let's handle the aperture. The aperture, it's also managed by your lens, and it's the most wide open aperture that your lens can do. So the highest aperture of your lens is not the biggest number, it's the smallest number. I know it's a bit confusing, but you need to know that stuff if you want to learn about photography. So the maximum aperture of this lens is 2.8, so I will use 2.8. For example, if I was using this lens, it's f4, so I'm gonna use f4. If your lens is 3.5, use 3.5. If you are using a smartphone, you don't have aperture control, so f it. Also, white balance. Honestly, I don't really care about the white balance because I photograph raw. For some reason, you are not photographing raw. That's a bit weird, but you should. Especially that your camera is able to make manual control, it should do raw photos. But if it doesn't, for some reason, try out some different white balance to check out the color that you like, because this is more like a personal thing. I really like my Milky Ways a little bit bluish, some people like it a little bit reddish, so it's a kind of a personal thing. Let's talk about focusing. Make sure your lens is in manual mode. If the focusing is on manual mode, and the stabilization, it's off. You are in a tripod, you don't need image stabilization. It's one of the most hard things to do, especially if you are in the field, because you have to focus your lens on the Milky Way, and for that you have to push your lens to infinity. So for example, this lens can go beyond infinity, and that's not good. That means that the Milky Way will be out of focus, So just pay special attention if your lens it's on infinity. From experience, I know that try to do that on the darkness of the night, it's really hard. Sometimes what I do, and I advise other people to do that, it's before leaving the house, put the lens on infinity and pick up some duct tape and glue the focus ring in place. Just to be sure. Peut-être c'est ça que tu dois le faire aussi, Jacques. C'est scotcher le truc noté avant de sortir de la maison, comme ça tu vas être tranquille. I use this technique especially to do time-lapse. Well then, ISO, the last setting on the camera that you need to handle is the ISO. You are forcing the camera to photograph something that you can't even see with your eyes. So you have to go at least 1600 ISO. Me myself, I use 3200 ISO with the 6D. If you are comfortable to go even higher than that, go for it, because if you go really high on the ISO, more noise will end up on your picture. There is no way to know how much ISO you can tolerate except doing the pictures with high ISO and seeing in the computer if that ISO it's way too much or not for your own taste. For me, 3200 ISO, it's my limit on this camera. Yours may vary and your taste also may vary. Test that thing on the dark, of course. Take some pictures on your closet or on a really dark room of different ISO and check out which ISO you can tolerate by noise on the image. I show you guys the settings of your lens, the settings on your camera, some cool stuff that you can use, and for some bonus I'm gonna show you some cool stuff that I bring up with me. Of course, it's really important to have some kind of light, okay? But I don't usually use this because I'm not a great fan of hand light. What I actually use, I use my camera light because you don't have any moon, so everything will be extremely dark when you're gonna do that picture. So bring light with you. And also what I use a lot, a LED panel. Why I bring this with me? Sometimes I have to add some light to the nature or to a building or something that I am photographing, and I use this panel light just to fill a little bit and have some detail on the picture. Some people use some other stuff to add some light. I use a panel light, but you also can use your smartphone light wherever it works. Well then, I also have this really cool connect and disconnect the strap of my camera, especially if there is wind. The strap will shake the camera, okay? So I can remove it really quickly with this pike design thing. Just press on the middle, remove it, there we go, and I can connect it again, like so. Really simple and really cool thing to have. Be careful during the night, even during the summer. It can get cold, so bring something to cover yourself. Water, because you're gonna be on the middle of nowhere for sure. So bring water, bring some lights, and be safe out there because you're gonna work in the dark, extreme dark, so yes. Well everyone, the third part, editing the photo. So I'm gonna do this in the separate video because I think this video is already very long. I guess it's around 25 minutes by now. So, do you agree separating the video in two parts? I did make a poll on Instagram, and actually you guys decided that it's better to separate it in two. So leave it down in the comments what you think. I also have a poll on the info card, so you guys can vote. If the video is too long, I break it in two, but for this one, I'm gonna break it in two for
Two reasons, because this one is already very long, and the second reason is because I always want to make a Lightroom app tutorial, and I'm gonna use that picture to be edited by Lightroom app, and I guess this is a good opportunity to make it so.
I'm really glad that you made it to the end, and it's time to say goodbye. So, if you have any question, leave it on comments down below, I try to answer. If you learned something, please drop a like on this video and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. I'm Miguel, until next time, see ya. Jack, you say goodbye also?
Bye-bye, bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.